It was a bright Saturday afternoon when the annual community fair took place in the heart of Maplewood Park. Families laughed, children played, and the scent of popcorn filled the air. Among the cheerful crowd was Daniel, a quiet man in his early 30s who wasn't exactly known for being the life of the party. He was the kind of person who blended into the background, polite but reserved, a man of few words. Daniel had come to the fair to support a charity booth run by his friend Mia. He smiled faintly as he watched her explain the cause to passersby, her enthusiasm lighting up the small table decorated with colorful flyers. Everything seemed peaceful until a sudden commotion broke the harmony of the event. A loud voice erupted near the Ferris wheel, followed by a sharp cry. Heads turned as a man shouted angrily, pointing in Daniel's direction. "You've gone too far." The man yelled, his face flushed with emotion. Daniel stood frozen, confusion written all over his face. People whispered among themselves, trying to piece together what had happened. Within minutes, rumors spread through the crowd like wildfire. "Did you hear? Daniel attacked someone," one woman whispered to her friend. "He's always seemed a little off," another chimed in. Mia rushed to Daniel's side, her eyes wide with concern. "What happened?" she asked, but Daniel could only shake his head. "I didn't do anything," he replied quietly, his voice steady but strained. The man accusing Daniel, a local vendor named Greg, told his version of the story to anyone who would listen. According to Greg, Daniel had suddenly lashed out, pushing him during a heated argument. "He's aggressive," Greg declared. "I've seen people like him before, always looking for trouble." The crowd's mood shifted. People who once greeted Daniel with polite nods now avoided his gaze. It didn't take long for the incident to make its way onto social media, where headlines and hashtags painted Daniel as a villain. "Local man causes scene at family fair," one post read, accompanied by a blurry photo of Daniel standing alone, looking stunned. But the real story was far more complicated. Daniel didn't argue or defend himself against the accusations. Instead, he stood quietly, watching as his reputation crumbled before his eyes. Inside, he felt a storm brewing, anger, sadness, and frustration all at once. He wanted to scream the truth, but who would believe him? The crowd had already made up their minds. As the fair continued, Daniel left quietly, his heart heavy. Mia watched him go, her mind racing. Something about the situation didn't feel right. She knew Daniel better than most, and he wasn't the kind of man to act without reason. Determined to find out the truth, Mia decided to investigate. She wasn't ready to let this injustice stand. The fair continued, but for Daniel, the day had taken a turn he never could have imagined. The next morning, Daniel sat alone in his small, cozy living room. The curtains were drawn, and a mug of untouched coffee sat on the table in front of him. The accusations from the fair still echoed in his mind. He scrolled through his phone, reading the comments on social media posts about the incident. Each word felt like a dagger to his chest. "Wow, I knew he was weird, but this... unbelievable," one comment read. "Keep people like him away from community events," said another. Daniel's hands tightened around his phone. He wanted to respond, to tell the world he wasn't what they thought he was. But how could he explain himself when no one seemed to want the truth? He felt helpless, like a man sinking in quicksand, with no one to pull him out. Meanwhile, Mia was already hard at work. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the entire situation. Daniel wasn't perfect. No one was. But she knew he wasn't an aggressive person. She had seen him go out of his way to help others too many times to count. If he had done something at the fair, there had to be a reason, and she was determined to find it. Her first step was to speak with the people who were at the scene. She returned to the park, now quiet and empty, except for a few joggers and dog walkers. She found Greg, the vendor who had accused Daniel, packing up his stand. Maya approached him cautiously, putting on her most polite smile. "Hi, Greg," she said, keeping her tone light. "I was at the fair yesterday, and I couldn't help but hear what happened with Daniel. Do you mind telling me what exactly went down?" Greg frowned and looked annoyed. What's there to say? The guy came out of nowhere and shoved me. It was unprovoked. Completely out of line, he said, shaking his head. You were there, weren't you? You saw how he acted. Mia nodded slowly but didn't say anything. She knew better than to argue right away. Instead, she decided to try another approach. It's so strange, she said thoughtfully. Daniel isn't like that. Did something happen before the push? Greg hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. I don't know. Maybe he was having a bad day. People like him snap sometimes. Mia's stomach churned at the vague response. She decided she wouldn't get any more useful information from Greg. But as she turned to leave, a nearby maintenance worker caught her eye. He was fiddling with a camera mounted on a pole near the Ferris wheel. Excuse me, she called out, walking over to him. Is that a security camera? Was it recording yesterday? The worker glanced at her, then at the camera. Yeah, it's always on. Why? Did something happen? Mia's heart raced. This could be the proof Daniel needed. She thanked the worker and made a note to follow up with the venue's manager. If the camera captured what really happened, there might still be hope to clear Daniel's name. Mia couldn't stop thinking about the security camera. If it had captured the incident, it could change everything for Daniel. She wasted no time and headed straight to the community center office, where the security footage was managed. The office was a small building tucked away near the park, with a simple sign that read, Park Administration. Inside, a receptionist greeted her with a friendly smile. Hello, how can I help you? Mia took a deep breath and stepped forward. Hi, I was at the fair yesterday, and there was an incident near the Ferris wheel. I heard there might be security footage from one of the cameras. Is it possible to review it? The receptionist's smile faltered slightly. We don't usually allow public access to the footage unless it's requested by law enforcement, she said. Mia's heart sank, but she didn't give up. Please, it's really important. A misunderstanding has caused a lot of trouble for someone, and this footage could clear everything up. Is there any way I can just look at it? The receptionist hesitated, then glanced around the office as if checking for anyone listening. Finally, she leaned in closer. I can't show you the footage, but you can fill out a request form. It might take a few days to get approval. Mia frowned. A few days. By then, Daniel's reputation could be ruined beyond repair. She had to act faster. Thank you, she said, taking the form, even though she knew waiting wasn't an option. As she stepped out of the office, Mia's mind raced. There had to be another way. Suddenly, she remembered the maintenance worker from earlier. He had been adjusting the camera. Maybe he could help. She quickly made her way back to the park and found him by the Ferris wheel. Hi again, Maya said, trying to keep her tone light. I was wondering if you could help me with something. The man looked up from his work. Sure, what is it? Mia explained the situation briefly, careful not to sound too desperate. The worker scratched his head. Well, I don't know if I'm supposed to, but I guess I could show you a quick clip. It's not like I'm handing over a copy or anything. Mia's eyes lit up. Really? Thank you so much. The worker pulled out a small tablet connected to the camera system and scrolled through the footage. This is from yesterday afternoon, right? Near the Ferris wheel. Mia nodded eagerly. The man tapped a few buttons, and the screen displayed a clear image of the event. Her heart raced as the scene played out before her eyes. She saw Daniel standing calmly, his body language defensive, not aggressive. Then she saw Greg approach him, gesturing wildly before invading Daniel's personal space. The push had happened, but not the way Greg described it. Daniel had been provoked. Mia's chest tightened. This was it, the proof she needed. But now came the hard part, convincing the world to see the truth. Mia's hands trembled as she watched the footage again. It was clear Daniel hadn't been the aggressor. The video showed Greg moving toward Daniel, his gestures becoming more forceful as he raised his voice. Daniel had taken a step back, trying to avoid the confrontation, but Greg continued to crowd him. When Greg shoved him, Daniel's reaction was purely defensive. Mia knew she had to act quickly. The footage could change everything, but she couldn't just keep it to herself. She had to share it, to make sure Daniel's side of the story was heard. She took a deep breath and called Daniel. Her phone rang for a few moments before he picked up. "Hello." His voice sounded tired, almost defeated. "Daniel, it's Mia. I've got something," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I saw the footage, and it's not what Greg said. You weren't the one who started it. He provoked you." Daniel didn't say anything at first. Mia could hear him breathing, but he seemed lost in thought. "Are you sure?" Daniel finally asked, his voice quiet. "Yes, I'm sure. The camera caught everything. You were just trying to get away from him, but he kept pushing. When he shoved you, you only reacted to protect yourself," Mia explained, her words rushing out. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and Mia began to wonder if Daniel was going to speak again. "I didn't want any of this to happen," he said finally. "I don't know how this got so out of hand." "I know," Maya replied softly, "but now we have a chance to make things right." Mia could hear the hesitation in Daniel's voice. She understood how he felt. His reputation had taken a hit, and facing the public again would be difficult. But Mia wasn't going to let him hide. She had to convince him that this was the right moment to clear his name. "I know it's tough," she said, trying to sound reassuring. "But the footage is the truth. If we can get it out there, people will see you for who you really are. They'll understand you didn't do anything wrong." Daniel sighed. "But how do we do that? How do we convince everyone that I'm not some angry guy looking for trouble?" "We start by showing the video." "I'll help you," Maya said. "We'll post it, and I'll make sure everyone knows the real story. We can even write a statement, explaining what happened. We don't need to hide anymore." There was another long pause. Finally, Daniel spoke again, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "All right, Mia, let's do it." Mia felt a wave of relief wash over her. Daniel was willing to fight for the truth. Now they had a plan. She'd help him share the footage and explain everything. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was the right thing to do. After hanging up the phone, Mia felt a renewed sense of determination. She spent the next few hours preparing the video to post online, writing a clear statement that explained what had really happened. She knew it would take time for people to change their minds, but she also knew the truth would eventually win. Mia stayed up late into the night, working on the video and the statement. She reviewed everything carefully, every frame of the footage, every word in the explanation. She wanted to make sure it was perfect. It wasn't just about clearing Daniel's name. It was about showing the world the truth. The next morning, Mia met with Daniel at his small apartment. He looked tired, but there was a flicker of hope in his eyes when he saw her. "You ready?" Maya asked, holding up her laptop. "I've got everything set up. We can post the video now." Daniel nodded slowly. "I don't know, Mia. What if people still don't believe it? What if they think I'm just making excuses?" "I understand," Maya said, sitting next to him. "But this is the only way. You know what happened. The footage shows everything. We just need to make sure people understand." Daniel sighed, running his fingers through his hair. It's so hard. I've spent so long trying to avoid attention, and now this. It feels like everything is crashing down." Mia placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know it's scary, but sometimes the only way to fix things is to stand up for yourself. You don't have to fight alone. I'm here with you." Daniel looked at her, his expression softening. "Thanks, Mia. I appreciate you sticking by me." She smiled and opened the laptop. "All right, here we go." She clicked a few buttons and uploaded the video. The footage started playing on the screen, clear and undeniable. Daniel had been trying to walk away from Greg, not looking for a fight. The video showed Greg invading Daniel's personal space and shoving him first. Daniel's reaction had been nothing more than a defensive push to protect himself. Once the video was uploaded, Maya wrote a short message to go with it. "This is what really happened. I'm not an aggressive person. I just want the truth to be seen. Thank you for understanding." With a deep breath, she clicked the post button. The video and message were now live. It felt like a weight lifted off her shoulders, but she knew this was only the beginning. The video had to be shared, and the right people had to see it. Daniel's future was still uncertain, but at least now, he had a chance. Over the next few hours, Mia and Daniel watched as the video began to spread. People started commenting on it, some apologizing for jumping to conclusions, while others still seemed hesitant to believe the footage. Mia kept checking back, replying to comments, and making sure the truth was being heard. A few people from the community reached out privately, offering support. Some were even shocked by how much of the story they had misunderstood. Slowly, the tide began to turn in Daniel's favor, but there were still many who weren't convinced. Mia knew this battle wasn't over yet. "Thanks for doing this," Daniel said quietly, looking at the screen. "It feels good to finally have the truth out there." Mia smiled. "We've only just begun. We'll keep fighting until everyone knows what really happened." The days following the video's release were a whirlwind. Maya and Daniel watched as comments flooded in. Some people offered their support, apologizing for believing the rumors. Others, however, remained doubtful. The video was clear, but the power of the crowd's opinion was hard to shake. Daniel spent most of the time reading the comments, his emotions swinging from hope to frustration. The hurtful words still stung, but there were moments of relief when someone acknowledged the truth. Maya stayed by his side, offering encouragement whenever she could. "It's going to take time," Maya reminded him one evening. "People don't change their minds overnight. But we're getting there, one step at a time." But as the days passed, a small group of people started to push back. They called the video edited or misleading. They questioned Daniel's character and tried to discredit the footage. The negative comments became louder, and the doubt started to grow again. Mia watched this happen with growing concern. She knew the truth, but convincing everyone else was harder than she expected. She could see the toll it was taking on Daniel. His confidence, once shaken by the accusations, had been slowly rebuilding. But now, the doubts from others were threatening to knock him down again. "We can't let them keep doing this," Maya said one night after reading through another set of negative comments. "We've got the truth on our side. We just have to keep showing it." Daniel sat quietly, his eyes fixed on the screen. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," he admitted. "What if the people who still don't believe me never will? What if it's just too late to change their minds?" Mia looked at him, her heart aching for her friend. She knew how much this meant to him, and how painful it was to feel misunderstood. But Maya refused to let him give up. "You can't stop now. We have to show them the truth. Even if it's hard, we have to keep pushing forward." Just then, an unexpected message popped up on the screen. It was from one of the local news outlets, a small online platform that had picked up the story. They had seen the video and wanted to speak with Daniel for an interview. Mia's heart skipped a beat. This was the chance they'd been waiting for, the opportunity to tell the world the full story, face to face. They could no longer hide behind the screen. This was their moment to speak directly to the people who had been skeptical. "We need to do this," Maya said, her voice full of conviction. "This is how we can reach more people. It's time to show them who you really are, Daniel." Daniel looked at her, uncertainty still in his eyes. But after a long pause, he nodded. "All right, let's do it. If this is the best way to make it right, then I'm in." Mia smiled. "I'm with you all the way." The next day, Daniel sat down with the reporter. The interview was calm, respectful, and honest. Daniel spoke from his heart, explaining the events in his own words. As he shared his side of the story, Mia watched from the sidelines, proud of how far he had come. It was a brave step, and they both knew it would make a difference. The interview was everything Mia and Daniel had hoped for. The reporter, a kind woman named Sarah, had asked thoughtful questions, allowing Daniel to speak freely. She didn't rush him or try to twist his words. She simply gave him a chance to explain what had really happened at the fair. As Daniel spoke, he kept his voice steady. He told the world about his past, a history of helping others, working quietly behind the scenes, and avoiding confrontation whenever possible. He explained that the altercation with Greg had caught him off guard. He wasn't looking for a fight, but he'd had no choice but to defend himself when Greg's actions became threatening. "It's just not in my nature to be aggressive," Daniel said, looking directly into the camera. "I was just trying to get away. But when Greg shoved me, I had to react." As the interview aired online, something began to shift. The video had been seen by thousands of people, but now, with Daniel's words accompanying the footage, the narrative was changing. People began to listen. The doubts that had lingered started to fade, and the positive comments began to grow in number. "I can't believe I ever doubted him," one comment read. "He's clearly just a guy trying to avoid trouble. I was there at the fair, and I saw it differently." Daniel was just defending himself. "Thanks for showing the truth," another person wrote. The community's response was heartening, but what made Maya smile the most was the message from Greg. It came in the form of a private apology sent directly to Daniel. "I'm sorry for everything." Greg's message read, "I shouldn't have said what I did. You didn't deserve any of this. I misjudged you." Mia read the message aloud to Daniel, who sat in silence, processing the apology. His expression was mixed. He felt relief, but there was still a part of him that couldn't fully shake the sting of what had happened. "It's not enough to make everything right," Daniel said quietly, "but at least people are starting to see the truth. That's what matters." Mia nodded. "You've done the hard part, Daniel. Now we can move forward." Over the next few weeks, the story continued to evolve. As more people shared the video and the interview, Daniel began to regain the trust of his community. The local news outlets covered the story from a new angle, focusing on how the truth had come to light and how the power of social media had allowed Daniel to clear his name. But even as things started to settle, Mia knew that this wasn't the end. The process of rebuilding trust would take time, and the wounds from the public backlash wouldn't heal overnight. However, Daniel was stronger now. He had faced the challenge head-on, and with Mia's help, he had come out the other side, proving that the truth always has a way of shining through. For Daniel, the experience had been painful, but it had also been a lesson in resilience. He had learned that sometimes standing up for what's right meant standing alone at first, but in the end, the truth would always speak for itself. As the weeks went by, the story of Daniel and the community fair began to fade from the headlines. But for Daniel, the lessons he learned during that time stayed with him. People who had once believed the worst about him now saw him in a different light. Slowly, but surely, he started to rebuild the trust he had lost. One day, Mia invited Daniel out for coffee. She knew he had been through a lot, and she wanted to check in on how he was feeling now that things were starting to settle down. They met at their usual cafe, a cozy place with large windows that let in the sunlight. Daniel walked in with a small smile, looking a little more relaxed than he had in weeks. "Hey," Mia greeted him warmly. "How are you doing?" Daniel sat down across from her and took a deep breath. "Better, I think. It's still a little weird, you know. People still look at me differently sometimes. But it's getting easier." Mia smiled. "I'm proud of you, Daniel. You handled everything so well. You stood up for yourself when you had every reason to just walk away." Daniel looked down at his coffee, swirling it slowly. "I don't know about handling it well. It was hard. I just kept thinking about how my whole life was being defined by something I didn't do." Mia nodded in understanding. "That's the hardest part. But now you've proven what's true. And that's what really matters. The truth doesn't change." Daniel's expression softened. "Yeah, And it's funny. All this time, I thought I had to hide who I was to fit in. But now, I know the people who really matter will see the real me. And that's enough." They sat in silence for a moment, both reflecting on the journey Daniel had been through. The pain of being misunderstood, the challenge of standing up when no one believed in him, it had all been worth it. And though it wasn't easy, Daniel had come out of it stronger than before. "You know," Maya said after a while, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking. Maybe we can use everything that happened to help others." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Mia smiled. "You've learned a lot about standing up for yourself, and you've seen how much power the truth has. What if we could help others who've been falsely accused or misunderstood, like you were?" Daniel's eyes lit up. "That sounds amazing. How do we start?" Mia's face brightened. "We could create a support group. Maybe even work with local organizations to raise awareness about how easy it is to misjudge people without knowing the whole story. I think a lot of people could use someone like you to show them that there's always more to the story." Daniel smiled for the first time in a long while. "You know, that's actually a great idea. I've been through a lot, but if I can help just one person feel less alone, it'll be worth it." Together, they began brainstorming ways to turn Daniel's experience into something positive. It wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. It was about helping others who had been through similar struggles. They knew it would take time, but they were ready to make a difference. In the end, Daniel realized that the journey he had gone through had given him something even more valuable than a cleared name. It had given him a purpose. He had faced his fears, stood up for the truth, and now, he had the chance to help others do the same. Months passed since the fair, and Daniel had begun to feel like his old self again. The scars from the public accusations were still there, but they were slowly fading as his life returned to normal. Thanks to Maya's help, he had started the support group, and it was growing. More and more people came to their meetings, sharing their stories of being misunderstood or falsely accused. Daniel realized that what he had gone through was not as rare as he thought. He had never imagined that his struggle would turn into something so meaningful. The support group was a place where people could find a voice, a place to speak their truth without fear of being judged. Daniel's story was a source of hope for many who had faced similar challenges. One afternoon, as he and Mia were setting up for another meeting, Daniel couldn't help but smile as he looked around the room. There were people from all walks of life, some young, some older, but all of them had one thing in common. They had been wronged in some way and needed help finding their way back to the truth. "You know, I never thought we'd get this many people," Daniel said, his voice filled with quiet pride. "It feels good to know that what we're doing is really making a difference." Mia nodded, her face glowing with excitement. "You're doing all the hard work. This wouldn't have happened without you. I'm just glad I could be a part of it." Daniel felt a wave of gratitude toward Mia. She had stuck by him when no one else did. She believed in him when everyone else believed the worst. Without her, he wasn't sure where he would be now. As the meeting began, Daniel stood at the front, ready to share his story once more. He had told it so many times, but it never got easier. Each time he spoke about the fair and the false accusations, he was reminded of how hard it had been, but also of how much he had grown. He knew his words could help others who were still struggling to find their voice. "This is our space," Daniel began, addressing the group. "A place where we don't have to hide or apologize for who we are. No one here is alone. We've all faced something difficult, but we've also learned that the truth matters. We stand up for it, even when it feels like the world is against us." The group listened closely, nodding in understanding. Some of them had been through things far worse than Daniel's experience, but they all shared the same sense of hope. They all believed in the power of the truth, and that belief was what brought them together. As the meeting went on, people shared their stories. Some of them were heartbreaking, others were inspiring, but they all had one thing in common: the strength to keep going despite the odds. Daniel looked around at the faces in the room, and for the first time in a long while, he felt at peace. The support group was more than just a way to heal. It was a way to make sure no one else had to go through what he did. Daniel had learned that sometimes the truth wasn't enough to stop the pain, but it was always worth fighting for. And now he had found a way to turn his pain into something beautiful, something that could help others find their way, just as he had.